That's James's meal for today. I burnt the stir fry or fried rice a bit, and James will be talking about respect, and I'll talk about these other two movies, and
If time.
James is going to talk about Johnnie L. Cochran Jr., and he's already talked about Rebel with the Cause.
Didn't exhaust it. The book exhausted me, but it's hard to get through. So you want me to talk about Aretha
Respect.
Franklin?
Yeah.
Or Riri, as she was called. Aretha Franklin is what Steely Dan, something like one of their songs, Hey 16 or something, hey whatever, 19.
All I can say about that movie is, wow, was that ever long?
It was long. Never heard of Aretha Franklin. She don't know about Aretha Franklin. She's never heard of the Queen of Soul. So that's what she was called, the Queen of Soul. Back in the day, they had to have an explanation for poor benighted folks nowadays. They were saying, it's a form of rhythm and blues. Don't make me laugh. Rhythm and blues back in Aretha Franklin's day was Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Fats Domino probably, and people of their like. I was going to say ilk but ilk generally refers to people you disapprove of. Some of those folks I disapprove of. Chuck Berry had some major league problems, deservedly so, with the law, and Jerry Lee Lewis deserved to have problems with the law. The story goes he might have done a murder or two, and if you're still alive, Jerry Lee, shame on you. But he lived in a place where I think the people, I don't know if the law were his relatives or close friends or something like that, so he got away with murder. Did I say Jerry Lee? Well, he's a white guy. The other folks were that I was mentioning were black. Where Jerry Lee would be thought, Jerry would have been called rockabilly or something like that, maybe. But rhythm and blues is now something very, very different than what it was. Rocket 88, Ike Turner, who played piano apparently on that. That was even the early 50s. That was rhythm and blues. And if you don't know who Ike Turner is, the former husband of Tina Turner. I think he's now seriously dead. Stuff like that. Anyway, that was one moment that didn't really thrill me when they were trying to explain gospel and or soul music by saying it's kind of like rhythm and blues. Let's have a little authenticity. They wouldn't have talked about it as being rhythm and I don't think. Maybe I don't know. Quite a good movie. Lengthy, but I didn't really notice the length. I played all the bonus features. Pauline can attest to that. I missed the first part of it because I was eating or something like that. Pauline turned it on for me, and I made sure that I caught the beginning of it as well. So I missed a little part in the middle, and I wasn't going to sit through it all. To get to that part, that's when I let the dogs outside. I let the dogs out in order for them to relieve themselves and stuff like that. So that was, maybe a minute or two. But it was, for me, well worth watching. If you like music, if you were alive during that era, Aretha Franklin was never my favorite, not even one of my favorites. So we're eventually, Pauline and I will do, if I last long enough, a kind of like a critical evaluation. It's nice when the critics get criticized. So I'm talking about rock and roll critics, or whatever, pop critics, says Rolling Stone. They, about a year and a half ago, they put out a listing of what they deemed to be the top 100 songs of all time, or records, or whatever. And number one on the list was R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me, or whatever the lyric goes. I never really bothered to find out what the second line is. But that's
I never liked that song.
I wasn't.
Because it doesn't have room for all the letters in the rhythm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She kind of RESPCT. It's not
kinda
the E
slurs
is
a
kind
little.
of left note, and
And-
it really sounds bad
Yeah,
for.
it's
Like,
written-
okay, does she not know how to spell? Like, it
Well,
really
it's-
sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's not her. She didn't
I
write
know,
it.
I
It
know,
was-
but
yeah, I know.
for her singing it,
I know. So, well,
because she's the face of the song.
Yeah, I know. And it was in the original, as I recall. It was written by a guy called Otis Redding, who's considered a bit of a martyr to the cause, although I think he was just killed in an airplane accident or whatever. And what was out when he died was something called Dock of the Bay, which was a huge hit in '67, kind of like a crossover hit. He was kind of trying to do something that sounded, I think that would be the Bay Area around San Francisco. What is it called? San Francisco Bay, I think. And so that's why it doesn't sound nearly as rootsy, shall we say, as most of his other stuff. So, you know, like one of the best things a person can do to make themselves an immediate hit, and to a certain extent a long-term hit as well, is to die young. That happened to Otis Redding. It happened to Jimi Hendrix. Happened to Jim Morrison of the Doors. You don't get too many pictures of Jim Morrison looking old, except in that last stage when he started to really pork on the pounds and had that dead warehouse look, empty warehouse look in his eyes. People are going, man, oh man, how could he have a heart attack in a shower? He committed suicide. Come on. He was looking depressed. You can see when he's getting ready to go to Paris. When he's in Paris, his eyes just are dead. And that's not the way it should be. I can remember seeing one guy I used to work with at the Cancer Institute. I saw him one time in there, and I asked him what he had. And he had cancer of the colon. And I saw him 2 years later, and he lasted a long time. The last time I saw him, he was sitting down, and he stood up to shake my hand. I don't know how he worked up the energy to do that, because the only thing that was alive in him were his blue Irish eyes. But when your eyes die, you're dead on your feet. And that's the way Jim Morrison was in his last year when he went to Paris. He was dead. And he committed suicide so he could be buried along with, I presume he had some sort of plan about being buried with some of his heroes in, what is it, Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. I'm sure I got the name wrong. Père Lachaise, something like that. Anyway, this is a pretty good movie. You know, there are a couple of moments that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and almost like rubbed me raw. So they're saying blacks are, this is you know, after Martin Luther King was shot. Awful maybe the worst tragedy of the 60s.
Aside from JFK?
No, it's actually Robert Kennedy was the worst, because that allowed Richard Nixon to win the election, 68, and the Republicans were in for 8 years in a row after that. So that was the big tragedy of the 60s. And then maybe I'd say Martin Luther King, and then JFK. JFK was actually one of the best presidents of all time. All you sleazy, fake, I'm calling you nifty lefties, who think Jimmy Carter was so hot spit, and Kennedy was so awful, and Tony Blair was so awful, and Bill Clinton was so awful. You're way off in which field? Oh yeah, left field, you stupid. At any rate, you're really in right field. You guys aren't left-wingers. Wake up and smell the coffee. Now, so they're saying the reason why black people go for the church, her dad was a big and successful church guy, I think Baptist, in Detroit. And they're saying the reason why black people gravitate towards the church was because all of the violence and the oppression and stuff like that. Oh, what does that remind me of? Who said religion is the opiate of the people? That's one of Karl Marx's sound chumps. So I don't know if it's repeated, but it's been repeated by his acolytes ever since. I'm telling you something. Marxism is the fentanyl of the intellectuals, and unfortunately they want to impose it on the people. Of course, that nowadays doesn't include white folks, and well, they're white folks, but by and large, but white working class and working middle class people. I'm not talking about business class people. I have no truck with them. People like Donald Trump and people that are a little bit higher up the food chain than Donald Trump. So, or I should say, the chain of evolution. Another thing that bothered me was, what was it? That'll occur to me. At any rate, one thing that impressed me immensely and made it worth watching, I think, for anyone who likes music, is apparently they're claiming, and I think it might be true, that everything they did was done live. They might have punched in a few things to dress up some notes. So,
but yeah, the singing was awesome.
The singing was awesome, and this woman here, I think she's a singer. But she has learned how to act, if she didn't know already. She's a pretty good actor. And the girl they had playing Aretha Franklin back in the day was a pretty good actor too, and stuff like that. They did have one funny moment, the guy, Jerry Wexler, I don't know what happened, why they didn't have Ahmet Ertegun, I don't know how the Turks pronounce it. That's Ahmed, translated roughly into Turkish. Ertegun. He, along with Jerry Wexler, headed up Atlantic Records. Now maybe Jerry Wexler was the guy who was interfacing with Aretha Franklin, but Ertegun, Turkish, head of a record company, they should have given that some play. Jerry Wexler was Jewish. But no, and I think his brother was also involved, Nesui Ertegun. They were involved with Atlantic in a big way. And what, there's this was in the 60s, and they'd already been successful with jazz, and then they moved into rhythm and blues. But you know what record company that Led Zeppelin played for? Atlantic Records. And Led Zeppelin, I believe, did Cream. Buffalo Springfield, I think, was distributed. It was on Atco Records, I think. Buffalo Springfield, on and on. Person of color, that's in the 60s, okay? Wake up and smell the coffee, you folks that are going around saying the United States is systemically racist and that sort of stuff. Systemically racist? They were mentioning that the father, this is in the 60s and earlier, in the 50s, when Aretha Franklin was 10 years old. Probably when she was born. In Detroit, their family had a 5,000 square foot house. You ever lived in a 5,000 square foot house? This one might be 700 square feet. My house.
It's bigger than yours.
Yeah, this one I think might be 800. Mine is 700 square feet. Together, 1,500 square feet, not even a third of what she was raised in. This might be the theme of what I got to say. Johnnie L. Cochran. He's an old schmuck, we'll say. I'm not going to use the usual expression. He was getting up there when he got OJ off. OJ bought about the best lawyers in the world to get him off. And that was in, 1994? We'll say 95. I think this thing was published in 96 or 95. I'll just get a little check. See how good my 96, published in 96, in the wake of that criminal decision. OJ lost a civil, as he should have, a civil suit against him. Not that he was supposed to pay some money up. I don't know if he's ever paid that stuff up to the family of the guy he killed, what was his name, Goldman or something like that. But what was the difference between Johnnie and Cochran? He's dressed to the T's. He's dressed like a pimp, actually. But he wasn't raised like a pimp. He, unlike Aretha Franklin, was not born to wealth. But, you know, he was. I was born to wealth. A wealth of information, books. Both my parents were teachers. There were books around. You know, we were taught about the value of going to a library. So we didn't have lots of books. We couldn't afford them. But we got lots of books. We read lots of books. Every week when we were in the city, like Calgary and Regina, John, my older brother, and the kids that were old enough to make this walk, and it was a substantial walk. It was well over a mile. One way, as I recall, we'd go and get books. And it wasn't much of a challenge going out there the mile and a half, but we'd come back loaded with books. Now that I think about it, we must have been stashing away, and this is when we were going to school, stashing away a book a day. I'm just remembering that. 7 books I don't think would be unusual. Okay? So, you know, like it wasn't all serious stuff. I mean, back in Calgary between ages 10 and 13, I liked the Freddy the Pig series. Freddy the Pig Goes to Mars. Anyway, they had, when would it have been, I think it might have been maybe 51 or something like that. Dude is getting out of school and so on and so forth. But, you know, the 40s or something like that, they've got a 1911 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And that, according to him, and I believe it, was his favorite reading. He'd go through the Encyclopedia Britannica. So he eventually goes to Hollywood High. Got amenities in that, or he had amenities in that place back when, that I've never had in any school. I think they had a swimming pool. They had this, they had that. Anyway, he's always boasting about, and if you're actually good at something, boast about it. Now, I'm not going to be threatened by it, because I boast. You guys better not be threatened when I boast either, because you guys better be scrambling to keep up. And that's what, when I'm boasting, I'm telling you, you better get on the stick. If you want to criticize me, you better get on the stick. You better get some data. I can tell you. Oh, you nifty lefties out there, you've got no data to stand on. Not a leg to stand on. You don't have crutches to stand on. Or you don't have a walker to stand on. Understand, you're talking to a handicapped person. I've been on a walker. I've got 5 fractured vertebrae. So don't go the politically correct route and say, don't you be saying that about, no, you wouldn't say handicapped people. What is it, like physically challenged or something like that? I'm handicapped. Anyway, he's always boasting about being top of his class. And of course, that's, you know, his classes out in Hollywood High would be almost entirely white. That was back then. 96, he's one of the best, presumably, in the world. At any rate, comes recommended, not highly recommended. Pauline, I'm not going to say, hey, you got to. Oh, that's Otis Redding. That's something that Janis Joplin picked up, a mannerism I didn't particularly like when she picked it up. Got to. I haven't been telling her, you got to watch it. You know? But it's well worth watching, even though it's got Forrest Whitaker in it. Forrest does a pretty darn good job. They've got Mary J. Blige, is that how they say her name? She does a pretty good job of acting. She's more of a cameo role. I think they showed her singing and stuff like that. But yeah, so they've got some good acting here, good singing. And I can't remember the other thing that bothered me. I was so politically correct. Yeah, now, Aretha Franklin might have had a stage where she was saying that she supported Angela Davis. I'm going to be checking. But you do not emphasize that. That did not make Aretha Franklin, a nice person. Angela Davis, so far as I know, has never, ever renounced communism. She's a commie. She was given a PhD, given by a guy called Herbert Marcuse. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name properly. A German commie who came over, and he belonged to the Frankfurt School. All of them pretty well, except with the exception of one of them, useless, anti-humanists. They styled themselves communists. They were, or Marxists. Marx would have been turning over in his grave. Marcuse's formulas: we don't need, we meaning the communists, we don't need, or socialists, or lefties, nifty lefties, we don't need the working class. We don't need workers. They've betrayed the revolution. The revolution can never happen through them. Thank heavens. Because the working class, unions and stuff like that, were actually getting enough so that they, back then, now it's a little bit different, were getting kind of like what they deserved through collective action, collective bargaining and stuff like that. So his formula was, it's going to be students. He doesn't mention professors, but those are the ones that are going to be ruling the world. He doesn't mention that, but it's going to be professors like him. And then it's going to be people of color are going to be the foot soldiers, students and people of color.
Well,
yeah.
Really, I mean, that's a lot of people. If you're looking to youth for leadership, then you're in support of aggression, honestly, because that's, people are most aggressive.
Between 15 and 25 for boys or young men.
The fact of the matter is, Christianity was not ever about oppression or anything like that. If people follow the teachings of Jesus,
in its
they
original
turn the other cheek.
Yeah, and it's
it's not an aggressive religion. It's a very passive religion.
So turning the other cheek means you've already been slapped on one cheek.
And you let yourself get slapped again.
Well, it's really the way early Christians were, and that's real Christians hardly existed from between, let's say, 400 AD to around the time of the Reformation, around the time of the Protestant Reformation.
But I'll talk about the turn the other cheek a little later. I've been meaning to get back to reviewing a great course that I listened to.
So it turned the other cheek, and then the other cheek, and then the other cheek. Yeah, we have 4 cheeks. But that's the way real Christians were.
Scary stories to tell in the dark. This one had the police officer from Breaking Bad. And I can't remember what his name is.
Oh, that scary guy.
I don't think he's scary. Whatever.
The one who growled. Oh, no, him. Yeah, the guy who played the Thing. I'm thinking of a different guy. Yeah.
Anyway, the movie was actually pretty good. It had a bunch of little scary stories woven together, and I think anyone would want to watch that if they're into scary stuff. It's not for children, of course. Commuter, the Commuter. I watched this before. I always loved Liam Neeson, I think, and this movie's pretty good. I don't like the way it ends. It doesn't really wrap things up tightly enough for my liking, but so that's why it got the bottom of the pile rating. But I think everything we brought out today was worth going through.
Okay, so how much time have we got?
I don't know. I'll take a look-see.
I'm going to run you out of time.
Nope, you have 5 minutes.
Wow.
I can't believe it.
We touched on Johnnie L. Cochran. To hear him talk in the book, he really believes that O.J. was innocent. And Johnnie L. Cochran is a pretty smart guy, but he's a lawyer. What's a synonym for lawyer? 2 syllables, starts with L, ends in R, liar. So I think he's still lying about O.J. Can't be that dumb. It's amazing how he kind of lets Marcia Clark off the hook doesn't really criticize her that much. She's the woman who lost the case. But he really criticizes Christopher Darden, so I don't know. Did he see Christopher Darden as the token black or something like that on that on the prosecutorial side? I'm not sure. But he's really offensive about Christopher Darden. He's maintaining that, oh, they had such a tough job. Lance Ito was appointed to that job so that there'd be at the very least a mistrial. From what I can tell, he was making all sorts of things, making all sorts of moves that would have made it so the defense could have filed for a mistrial. Now, why was that? You know, they had the court case in, they had the trial in Los Angeles. Could have been anywhere in Los Angeles County or Los Angeles City or whatever. They had it right downtown, what I can gather. That was to avoid any appearance of white prejudice. The powers that be, I don't know who made all the appointments and stuff like that, Lance Ito, so on and so forth. They wanted OJ off. They did not want a Watts 1965 kind of situation where you get race riots. And a race riot is when, I don't care who's doing it, like Kristallnacht is a race riot, or a bunch of race riots. Watts 65 is a race riot, because what you've got are shops owned by Jewish people, nowadays it'd be Korean people, selectively getting burned, plundered, smashed up and stuff like that, selectively, with signs put on black shops. It's kind of like the sign that the Hebrews put on their put over their doors and stuff like that, and on the sides of their doors before the Passover, so the angel of the Lord would pass over, not kill them. So what would happen, I presume still happens in the race riots in the United States, is black shops don't get hit. They'll put signs, black shop or whatever. They don't get hit. So they wanted to avoid that. Millions of people dead. Watts riot, how many people got killed? 53 people or something like that? What are you going to say?
I was going to talk about the dark side of human nature, the turning the other cheek thing. Walter Wink's views on Jesus' middle way, cheek turning. Struck on the right side of the face means someone would be punching, if punching in a usual way, with their left hand. At the time, it was not appropriate to use your left hand in public. Using it is shameful. To strike a person on the right side of their face with the right hand, it must be a backhanded punch. This is what superiors do to inferiors. The fact that right is specified in the quote is interesting. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. A way for a pacifist to stand up to the oppressor and maintain their values. That's all I was going to say about that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
A minute?
Yep. Well, 30 seconds.
Okay.
So wrap her up.
Well, I'm going to wrap it up for now. And I want to deal with this in conjunction with, so get ready, you nifty lefties. Franklin Graham. I don't care for either of these folks, okay? Neither of them. Get ready. You folks that think Franklin Graham's awesome. Here he is in a Harley Davidson leather jacket and stuff like that. We're going to analyze the pictures in his book. Now, how many times guns and motorcycles occur.